Hello everybody, today I thought we'd change pace from my usual style of video where I talk about a tribe for 10 minutes or so, to talk about something that will perhaps impact on your game in Polytopia a lot more than any of that. Specifically, we'll be discussing the basics of strategy that you should be applying to every game of Polytopia with any tribe. First though, I have to make a couple of disclaimers. These tips do not apply to tribes with a unique playstyle, and for that reason I've chosen the famously generic Imperious tribe to help me with this tutorial. This is also going to be one of my more beginner-oriented videos, so with that out of the way, let's start with the very basics of Polytopia. The first tip I want to make clear here is city upgrades. Every time you upgrade a city, you're given a choice between two different upgrades, those being decided based on the level of the city. For the level 2 and level 3 city upgrades, you always have an economic option, that being either an extra star per turn or 5 bonus stars. These are highly recommended to give you the resources necessary to develop an economy later on. Without these upgrades in at least some of your cities, you'll struggle to build as many units as your rivals, or will find yourself without advanced technology in the middle game, and both of these are, it goes without saying, serious disadvantages. However, their counterparts are of course not entirely to be dismissed. The Explorer reveals a random selection of tiles around the city in which you select it, and is a useful tool for locating enemies and economic assets alike. This is the option I tend to opt for if a few different conditions are met. You should already have a reasonable economy with a few cities at level 2 or level 3, and perhaps more importantly you need to have a reason to select the Explorer, such as an enemy unit whose hometown you want to locate. Beware that Explorers will often present the risk of moving in a direction other than the desired direction and thus being a waste of resources. Needless to say, for a city that is not near the fog, the Explorer is usually a bad bet. The level 3 upgrade asks the player to choose between a city wall that provides a strong defense bonus to any units in your city, and resources. This choice is far easier than the level 2 upgrade, and resources is almost always your default option. This is because any city that is not currently under heavy fire does not particularly need a city wall. This seems rash, but cities that are not directly next to enemies are rarely besieged in Polytopia, simply because any exploration is typically only limited by a natural barrier or enemy army, rather than because the player chooses not to explore further. This ties into my next point, which is army composition. In the earlier phases of the game, the mobile and damaging rider is usually the offensive powerhouse. The rider can move both before and after attacking, allowing you to cycle them, thereby allowing you to make multiple attacks per turn even through a narrow choke point. Resilient and cheap warriors serve well when defense is necessary. A further thing to mention is timing. Some tribes can level up their cities on the first turn of the game, which is an advantage worth giving up an extra unit on the first turn for. However, usually a warrior on the first turn to help explore is a preferable or equivalent option to a technology for harvesting resources on a tribe that does not start the game with an economic technology. But in the instance of Imperia, Sparta and similar tribes, you should always harvest resources to get a first turn capital upgrade. With these tribes, a unit on the second turn to capture villages and stave off early attacks is always a solid option. Later on though, other routes become available for you to play around with. Most importantly perhaps is the navy. In order to build any kind of navy you're requiring the sailing and navigation technologies in several ports. Although the navy is the easiest way to supplement land attacks with extra firepower and break stalemates, it is an expensive investment and as such should be an option that you only consider if several criteria are met. Firstly, because it takes several turns to build up a naval force, it is in your interest to only do so if you believe that you can survive for long enough to justify it. And secondly, you should take care only to place units with a high health pool into boats, as the health stat of the unit is the stat that determines the health of the boat it forms. Giants, defenders and warriors are preferred for this reason. Next, I want to discuss the way you should open a game. This is one element that depends on the tribe you choose, but as a general rule, you should seek to research economic technologies and free spirit before capturing cities, as these are the technologies that will let you level up those cities to get the benefits discussed earlier. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but free spirit in particular is a useful option because it lets you get a boost in star production simply by chopping down trees at any time. As for the timing, researching these techs after taking a city will cause the prices to rise according to the number of cities you have, allowing us to formulate the general early game rule: don't capture cities before researching technology. With this particular tip in your head, you should be able to save stars quite easily. Now lastly, I wanted to talk about some tips regarding knights, and this won't be as beginner friendly as the rest. I suggest before you watch this part too much, you take notice of what a knight does. So effectively a knight can chain attacks if it kills a unit completely in one hit, And knights are strong endgame units that are highly mobile and pack a punch, but sometimes they need a little planning to use correctly. In some cases, for instance, a knight will be unable to reach a key target in only a single turn, and in this instance you should be willing to cut down trees using the Free Spirit tech or the Burn Forest ability, both of which are required to obtain knights, or using a road network. It's often necessary to speed your units along to avoid giving the opponents a chance to reconvene or build any more units, and this doesn't just apply to knights either, this applies to every mobile unit. A related tip is always to make sure that you finish your attack chain with a knight before you select the promote to veteran option. The reason for this is that otherwise your knight may take damage after being promoted, in which case the extra health from its promotion will be wasted. However, in choosing to promote a damaged knight rather than one on full health, you automatically heal it somewhat, which is of course to your benefit. Next then, some further tips which are regarding further capital upgrades. When you upgrade a city to level 4, you get a choice between two different options, which are population growth and border growth. The population growth option gives you 3 population towards your next city upgrade, and this will allow you to get a level 5 upgrade much faster. It's fairly self-explanatory in the end. The border growth upgrade is perhaps a little more complicated. It expands the space which your city's borders occupy by 1 square in each direction. So what this effectively is useful for, it sounds not particularly useful on the face of it, but it does allow you to harvest extra resources. And I would default to choosing population growth, however I would choose border growth if a couple of conditions are met. If there's a lot of resources directly outside of your city, it's often worth taking border growth, and the reason for that is obviously to extract those extra resources, and often it can lead to better long-term growth because you're not hampering your city by getting lots of population now, but then not having extra resources to extract in the future. So what you're doing effectively by choosing border growth is you're choosing a longer term option that may not allow you to get to the level 5 upgrade straight away. And speaking of the level 5 upgrade, every city upgrade from level 5 and above gives you a choice between a Park of Fortune and a super unit. Now the super unit depends on what tribe you're playing, but effectively it's a very beefy, very strong unit. And the Park gives you extra score, it's very simple. Now, you should only ever be choosing the Park if you're playing in Perfection mode, or the multiplayer equivalent which is called Glory. If you're not playing in those modes, then it's completely useless except for aesthetic functions, so you should always choose the unit, unless either you'll get no benefit from the unit at all, or you're playing in Glory or Perfection mode. So that's just the thing to clear up straight away. And obviously it goes without saying that if you're under attack, you want to be making sure you're getting the super unit quickly, so often you want to favour population growth on the level 4 upgrade. As for border growth, it's often quite useful in coastal cities because you can uncover enemy ships, and perhaps more importantly you can get whales as well. And harvesting whales is a great way to boost your economy very quickly. It can be used as an exploring function because obviously it reveals all fog tiles when you expand your borders, but I'd say there are probably more efficient ways of doing that. So generally you want to be doing it in cities where you have room to expand, where you have a reason to expand, and perhaps most importantly where you're not being directly attacked. So that's my tips there regarding the city upgrades. Now I wanted to make it clear of course that which super unit you have depends on your tribe, as I touched on earlier, but whether or not you're going to be using your super units as a defensive force depends on which tribe you're playing as well. So with the Semanti tribe, for instance, their Centipede super unit is a very powerful super unit, but it's not so good for defense necessarily. Same also goes for Polaris, and I think there's one other tribe as well, Illyrion as well. Illyrion's dragon has fairly little health, so it's not able to withstand blows very much. But if you're playing as Aquarion or indeed a regular tribe, you shouldn't have these problems. So that's just been as much as I could cram into this brief to the 10-minute guide here, in terms of beginner strategies for Polytopia. Again, when I say following principles, these are the principles of the game which I've just set out here, but there are other ones as well. And of course you'll come up with more in the comments, and I could make this video an hour long really, but I don't want to bore any of you, so I think until the next video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.